Hi, we're Neil and Cheryl Josephson, the directors of Family Life Canada. Thanks for coming to this Marriage Mentor training and orientation. We really believe that working together on this could change the social fabric of Canada. I say that because marriage mentoring has the potential to make a huge impact on marriages, as well as the potential to impact a huge number of marriages.
Family Life Canada has worked with tens of thousands of couples since 1988, and we know that these couples fall into three basic categories. Those couples in real crisis, and our hearts just break when we hear their stories. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the couples who are doing great. These are the couples that other people look at and say, I want what they're having. But by far the majority are the couples in between. They're committed, they want to make their marriages work, but they're stuck. Sometimes it's a specific issue, sometimes it's bad patterns and behaviors that have developed. There are lots of reasons for it, but they often don't have the effort, the skills to push through. And very often they have no one in their corner telling them, you're normal.
Right.
These are normal, legitimate concerns. You can work through this, and we'll help you. They don't, in short, have marriage mentors.
Or at least not yet. And that's why you're here. And that's why we're so excited for this opportunity to talk to you about marriage mentoring. In this session, we're going to lay out for you just as clear as we can what marriage mentoring is all about, how to do it well, and we will train you in the conversational marriage mentoring tool that we've built. Maybe you're already committed to being a marriage mentor, or to start a mentoring movement in your church or in your community. Or maybe you're just checking it out. Whatever, wherever you're at. By the end of the session, we will provide you all the information you're going to need to make a good decision on your next steps. Thanks again for coming and giving your time to this important topic. Hey, so let's get started. Pull out your manual. We're going to turn to page 10 and ask the very basic question, why marriage mentoring?
Do you know the number one reason marriages break down? Dissatisfaction. And dissatisfied couples are less likely to spend time together and less likely to invest in their relationship. In fact, did you know that only 1 in 5 couples ever do anything proactive for their marriage? That includes going to a conference, taking a class, even reading a book. And these dissatisfied couples are more likely to go looking outside their marriage to have their emotional needs met. Research shows that marriage mentoring improves marriage satisfaction. Almost 70% of all couples undergoing marriage mentoring, you'll see the sidebar on page 10 in your manual, say the quality of their relationship improved.
The second compelling reason to do marriage mentoring is simply this: it reduces divorce. Now, if I asked you right now, what's the divorce rate in Canada, what would you say? I'm thinking most of you are saying right now 50%, because that's the word on the street, isn't it? But according to StatsCan, it's actually 41%, which means that almost 60% of Canadian marriages will succeed. They'll last a lifetime. But if couples do pre-marriage preparation, and if they are mentored by another couple, their success rate goes up over 80%, and according to some studies, to 90% success.
Isn't that amazing?
That is truly amazing, and that's good news. And even for couples in crisis, those who say we are on the brink of divorce, research shows that if they enroll in a marriage education program, combined with mentoring, they increase their chances of staying together by 70%. The key to both these findings is mentoring. Let me draw an analogy for you. Statistics have long shown that teenage drivers get in more accidents, and more serious accidents, than older drivers. What's the difference? Experience, of course. So years ago, across North America, we invested a lot in driver training education programs, which was a great idea, but they don't work. A recent study from Johns Hopkins University has data that proves that actually in some school districts, driver training had the reverse effect, increasing teenage driver accidents. Why is that? Overconfidence. You know, like, hey, I took the course, I got this, don't tell me how to drive. The study also showed that jurisdictions that have graduated licensing actually are very effective in reducing teen accidents. By that, we mean they get a partial license, then they drive a little bit, get some experience, then they take some more training, get a partial license. That's how you reduce car crashes. I'm sure you get the marriage mentoring connection, don't you? Lots of couples take the pre-marriage prep course, and then that's it. Hey, I'm good to go. But the most effective thing to do is, after they've had a little experience, is to come alongside and do some coaching and training to do marriage mentoring.
Neil and I meet couples almost every weekend at Family Life conferences that could really use some mentoring. In fact, just a few days ago, we met a young couple, 2 small kids, got some stuff going on, they're really struggling. The marriage conference gave them some new tools and helped them have some honest conversations, but they emailed us about a week after the conference asking if we could connect them to some additional help. So we sent them the name of a local marriage counselor, but what they really need, or at least in addition to counseling, is mentors. So we'll do what we can via email and phone calls, but our vision is that someday we can connect every couple like that with mentors in their community. Someone to look them in the eye and encourage them and pray for them and ask them good questions and gently hold them accountable to the commitments and the promises they've made to each other. To give them some help and lots of hope. And that is how we're going to reduce the divorce rate in this country by half. Mentoring.
And the other great thing about mentoring, the bonus, is that you, as mentors, strengthen your marriages too.
Yeah.
We hear awesome stories from our mentor couples about not just how their mentee couple's growing, but how they're growing. I love the quotes that are in your book. There's one on page 10 that says, "We can see how God has been preparing us for this, our entire married life." Interesting, right? Not preparing our mentees, but preparing us. What could be better than using your life lessons, your experience, your stories to help another couple? Have you ever been mentored yourself? Or maybe you've already mentored another couple. We're going to give you a few minutes to talk those 2 questions around at your table. On the bottom of page 10, there's a little blue section, Let's Talk. Those 2 questions are there. So why don't you take a few minutes, talk around the table about those questions, and your facilitator will bring you back when we're ready to move on. Enjoy the conversation.
Welcome back. We're still looking at the question, why marriage mentoring? Number 1, it improves marriage satisfaction. Number 2, reduces divorce. Number 3, benefits both mentors and mentees. And Neil and I have been both.
Yep.
We have both been mentored, and we always like to be in a mentoring relationship with a younger couple. It's going to get a little more challenging as we get older. Right now, our mentors are Theodore and Krisha. They're in their 80s, and they're still investing in younger couples.
And they call us the kids.
Yeah, they do. That's
Yeah.
why. And they pray for us every day. The 4th reason is on page 11. Mentoring addresses some of the common challenges to marriage. One of those challenges is deficient role models. We hear this a lot. A lot of young couples will say, we have no one in our lives to look up to. Our parents aren't together, or their marriage isn't one we want to emulate, and no other adults in our life are showing us how it can be done. Before Neil and I came to Family Life Canada, we were marriage pastors at a large church in California. We're Canadians, but we lived in the States for a few years and worked at this church. One evening, we were talking to a group of young couples in our home. This was a newly married group, probably about 15 couples, and we asked them to go around the circle and tell us about their families of origin. It turned out, in some cases, these young couples, married 3 or 4 years, had already been married longer than either of their parents. Isn't that crazy? They had no role models. The good news for them was that at least they were part of this community, this young couple small group.
And that is really important, because lack of community is another common challenge to young marriages. A lot of young couples are disconnected from their families, either by distance or circumstance. Maybe they haven't settled into a church community either. And a lot of times their circle of friends can't help because they're struggling in their own relationship just as much. And they don't have much more life experience to offer anyway, right? We're mentoring right now a young couple in their late 20s, been married 6 months. And in our last session, they listed off 3 of their friends that are already getting divorced. They were illustrating for us what the research is saying. On the top of page 11 in that right-hand box, it says there that couples with divorced friends or family are 75% more likely to divorce. I like the title of that study. Breaking up is hard to do unless everyone else is doing it too.
Yeah, I love that title. Disillusionment is another challenge. Most of us marry with a fairly high degree of illusion when we get married. Illusion about what marriage is supposed to be, illusion about our spouse, illusion even about ourselves. And part of getting to a real marriage with real intimacy is going through a bit of disillusionment. But many couples without wise mentors in their lives mistake that temporary phase of disillusionment for a permanent failure. They get discouraged and they pull the chute.
Discouragement is the child of disillusionment. You know, on page 11, you can see the research there. Of those couples who divorce, 40% do so in the first 3 or 4 years of marriage. That's a U.S. stat. So how are we doing in Canada? Well, Stats Can says the first big bulge of divorce in our country is in year 4. And we're convinced that the number one cause of that is unresolved conflict. Because we see it all the time. A young couple's hopes and dreams and expectations for what their marriage was going to be don't seem to be coming true. They disagree, they get hurt, they get scared, and they get out. And it's really so sad because in a majority of those cases, the issues are very manageable, but just not by them alone. They need marriage mentors.
We want to be quick to say that mentoring isn't just for young couples. Many of you will be mentoring couples who've been married 10 or 20 or 30 years, and you will likely encounter another common challenge to marriage: drift. Drift is often the result of busy schedules, a busy season of life. Oftentimes 10, 20 years in, careers are at their most demanding. You're raising kids. You may have aging parents. You have other commitments. And the marriage relationship can very easily get pushed to the back burner. And before they know it, couples have drifted apart. In fact, the second big bump in divorce statistics here in Canada is around year 20.
And we hate to be a stereotype, but that's kind of our story.
It is.
Though thankfully it didn't end in divorce. We were about 18 years into our marriage. We were super busy with our careers. I was the president of a Bible college. Cheryl was a television news anchor. We had 2 boys in elite athletics. I was trying to coach a couple of those teams. We were part of a church plant. Cheryl was super active in the community with
I'm exhausted just
volunteer
listening
stuff.
to this.
Yeah. If I had my life to live over, I don't think I'd have the energy.
No.
We were drifting apart because of busyness. How we found our way back is a story for another time, but you'll have to come to a family life conference for that. But we are living proof that when you drift, you can do better than just settling and surviving. You can come back together. You can come out the other side better, healthier, and more in love than ever before. But couples often need mentors to tell them that, to give them hope, and to help them believe that.
And then there's just a negative current flowing in our culture that's anti-marriage. It's reflected in television shows and movies, but it's also part of our everyday conversation. I mean, how often do you hear marriage being talked about as the ball and chain or the end of freedom? It's unnecessarily negative. As we said earlier, it's just accepted that half of all marriages end in divorce, which now you know isn't true. But it can lead to couples feeling like they've only got a 50-50 shot at succeeding. And when they start getting disillusioned or discouraged in their marriage, it's pretty easy to feel, you know what, I guess we're just part of that 50%. We really didn't have much of a shot anyway. But it is based on a lie.
And here's another thing about statistics. Can I just say, remember when you're working with a couple, they're not a statistic. They're an individual couple. So in one sense, it doesn't matter what the stats are. We can help one couple at a time. So back to the Stats Canada statistics. We already told you that in Canada, the divorce rate is 41%. But that's for all marriages. The divorce rate for first marriages is about 30%. So they have a 70% chance of making it. So that's good news. And we should be sharing that in our culture. But here's one more really encouraging statistic. When a woman from an intact home, mom and dad are still married, gets married to a man from an intact home, their marriage has a 91% chance of success. So people, when we mentor a marriage, in some ways we are really mentoring generations of marriages.
So why marriage mentoring? Because it improves marriage satisfaction, reduces divorce, benefits both mentors and mentees, and fourthly, addresses common challenges to marriages so that couples can work through their issues and stay together. And if they choose to raise kids, those kids will in turn stay married, and so on and so on and so on. This isn't just about us or about the one couple that we'll mentor. It's about changing family patterns for generations and changing our country. See what you're becoming part of? Are you getting a little bit excited?
We're going to turn it back to you now for a few minutes. Look at the talk box on the bottom of page 11. As we went through that list of common challenges on page 11, interact with those, okay? Answer the questions. Did any of those sound familiar to you? How did your mentors help you deal with some of those challenges? Or maybe if you didn't have mentors, what difference do you think it would have made? So have a conversation around your table for a few minutes on these 2 questions. We'll rejoin you in a few minutes. and learn from them, right? We had the master and the apprentice, the rabbi and the disciple. And so it's really not surprising that you see a lot of mentoring in the Bible. On the top of page 12, there's some examples. Elizabeth and Mary, Elijah and Elisha, Jesus and the disciples, Paul mentoring Timothy. These were different people in different kinds of relationships, but what they all have in common was mentors, people who shared their wisdom as well as their life. That's the secret. There's a great verse right at the top of page 12. It's in the blueprint there, 1 Thessalonians 2:8. I've invested a lot of my adult life in trying to help people learn and grow. I don't know a better strategy than this one. Let me read it for you. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. I don't know a better strategy for having a maximum impact in a person's life or in a married couple's life than that.
In your mentoring, you will have the opportunity to share your life story. And if you're a Christ follower, God's story, the gospel of God, is woven into yours. Or more accurately, as it says in your manual, your story is woven into the story of God. Sharing your spiritual journey will be a natural part of your conversations with your mentees. Mentoring, however, is not an opportunity to transfer or impose your beliefs and values onto another couple. We really believe this. We also believe that marriage was designed by God, and it works best when He's at the very heart of a marriage relationship. That means each of us is in a relationship to God, and then together we have a relationship with God. But we also know that some of the couples you will be mentoring won't be there yet. They may have never invited God into their life as individuals, and they may have no idea what it looks like to have God at the center of their marriage and their family.
As mentors, you will have the privilege to walk with your mentees as they sort out some of these things. As your relationship develops and as you grow trust, you will have increasing opportunities to talk about spiritual things. We know, we've seen it happen in our own relationships. But here's a caution, okay? If we abandon our mentor role to become preachers, we will fail at both mentoring and sharing the good news. You see, we believe in a mentoring context, the best way to share the gospel of God comes in the context of your life and your marriage story and the relationship you're building with your mentees. So we simply say, pray and be patient. The questions will come. Your mentees will want to know the difference that God's made in your life. So be prepared. Be prepared. One of my favorite verses about being prepared is 1 Peter 3:15. It's also printed in your book on page 12 there. Let me read it. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. That's a great word for all of us as mentors when we're thinking about sharing faith with our mentees.
Now, there are some resources in the back of your manual. Turn with us to page 106. And you'll see there's a section there on guiding a spiritual conversation. There are some questions there to help you think through, first of all, your own faith story, then how you might guide conversation and perhaps even initiate conversations about spiritual matters. You may have the privilege of walking alongside your mentee couple as they invite God into their lives and into their marriage. But note the paragraph at the bottom of page 106. If they are not open to discussing the role of faith in their lives at this point, don't push it. We can't force or manipulate spiritual growth. But we can be very upfront about our own faith and the resource it's been in our marriage and in our spiritual journey. In fact, for most of us, our marriage, our life, our story with God, our faith, they're all so entwined and wrapped up in each other that undoubtedly those things will surface as we share our stories with our mentee couples. Now, in the middle of page 107, there's a paragraph that starts, if you've never articulated your personal faith story, take time to write it down or talk it through and share it with your partner before you begin mentoring. Boy, it's helpful to actually articulate and then share that experience. I mean, write down how I first became aware of God, what led me to invite God into my life, the difference God has made in my life and in our marriage, and then to be able to describe the relationship that I have with God now. We need to be prepared to share the hope that we have because of Jesus. But we recommend, along with the Apostle Peter, that we do this with gentleness and respect.
Let's turn back in our manuals to page 14. We want to talk concretely and practically about how does this all work. We're going to get into the real nuts and bolts of this model of marriage mentoring. First of all, it's conversational. That's really good news because that means the fundamental tool of this mentoring model is something you already know how to do.
Some
Have a
of us
conversation.
Are good at it. Secondly, it's accessible. Anyone can do it if they have the heart for it and the experience for it.
It's adaptable. Marriage mentoring can be part of almost any setting.
It's affordable. In our model, you need one manual and one conversation guide, and you're good to go.
It's scalable. You can start a marriage mentoring program with 2 couples, one mentor couple and one mentee couple. You can grow it however large you want, but you can start with just 2 couples. You know, when we left our church in California to come work with Family Life Canada, we had 200 couples in the marriage mentoring program. But we didn't start there. We started small, and we grew it. When we left, we had a team of 10 couples leading it, and none of them were church staff, by the way. There's all volunteer run. And they led a very well-organized program with intake and orientation and training, a lot like this. But the point is, you don't have to start big. You just need a mentor couple, a mentee couple, a conversation guide, and your marriage mentoring program is ready to roll.
We know there are different ways to mentor, but we've designed a model after a great deal of research and experimentation that focuses on a year-long commitment from both the mentor and mentee couple. Both couples commit to meet a minimum of 10 times over the course of 1 year. So here are the steps. Mentors attend a training session. You can check that one off. And if you decide to proceed as mentors, and if you're part of a mentoring group in your church or community, you may be asked to provide a marriage resume to the leaders of that group. A sample resume is available on our website, familylifecanada.com. But in essence, you will be asked to outline your marriage story, your faith story, some personal interests, and your reasons for wanting to mentor. Mentee couples will be asked to do the same, though not quite as detailed.
Now, if you'll notice at the bottom of page 14, there's a brown box. And these brown boxes are spread throughout this manual. These are simply our recommendations for you. You don't have to do them. But on the other hand, we learned these things by experience, and we really recommend that you give them a good look and consider them. For example, we've learned that ideally, mentors have been married for at least 7 years. We've also learned that it's helpful to have a 10-year gap between the mentee couple and the mentor couple. Now, we have tried it with younger couples, and we've tried it with a smaller age gap. For us, it just didn't seem to work that well. So we recommend it to you. Mentee couples usually want to know that whatever life stage they're in, their mentor couple's just at least one step ahead of them, and they've come out the other side with some experience to share. We also recommend that both partners, husband and wife, in both the mentor couple and the mentee couple, contribute to the marriage resume. It's really important for both spouses to be committed to this whole mentoring relationship. Now, we did mentoring in a really large setting. Maybe that's your situation too. In that case, the leaders may not know everybody. And so that resume and the application really helps you get to know who they are and find out some common interests so that you can match mentor couple and mentee couple. Maybe they're blended family backgrounds or they got common family situations, common hobbies or interests. At any rate, it really can help. Now, if you're just doing this on your own as just one couple, we would still encourage you to ask your mentees at least, fill out some kind of resume. It would really help you learn more about them, and I think it helps them take the process a little bit more seriously. It could give you some great conversation starting points too.
Now, in the church we worked in, we also required mentors to be interviewed. This was a large church, 10,000 people. We often didn't know the couples personally, so we asked the mentors to be part of a 30-minute interview and also to submit references. Now, that may not be necessary in your context, but the bottom line is this: the quality of the marriage mentoring experience depends completely on the quality of the mentors. We're going to talk in a few minutes about what it takes to be good marriage mentors, but we can't say this strongly enough. The quality of the mentoring experience depends completely on the quality, not the education or the experience, but the quality of the mentors. You.
Now, a lot of times mentors that are just starting out say, where do I start? What are we going to talk about? Turn to the top of page 15, and you'll see listed in that gray shaded box 14 crucial topics that we have built into the Marriage Mentoring Guide. Each conversation is a series of questions around that topic. And it's the task of us as mentors simply to guide the conversation. We can use those questions and share our personal stories that illustrate marriage principles, as well as some of our personal best practices. But remember, it's a conversation around these topics. We suggest that these conversations take place in the context of a relationship of mutual trust and respect. Now, if you don't know your couple, obviously that'll take a little time to grow, but it's really important that that's a value you share right at the start. Second thing we recommend is that you have these conversations in a relaxed setting. Remember, this isn't therapy, it's not an interview, it's not a date. You just want to have a quality conversation in a comfortable place. So whatever works for you and your mentee couple, go for it, or at least try it initially. A lot of our mentee couples like to come to our house because we don't have kids and it's quiet,
It's quiet.
There's no distractions. But sometimes they want to meet in a coffee shop or some kind of neutral place. It's all good. Whatever environment they're used to and makes them comfortable talking, go ahead, meet them there, or at least try it and see if it works. We also recommend that every session is 60 to 90 minutes. And I think it should be 90 minutes because, when you get together, there's always a few social minutes. You're catching up and chatting. And I really think you should save a full hour when you get to the conversation itself.
So let's talk. On the bottom of page 15, we're going to give you a chance to take a look at the Mentoring Conversation Guide. Now, this is a separate section in your manual. It starts on page 31. As you're flipping over there, I want to tell you a couple of things. There are 2 parts in each of these conversations. For example, go to page 34, and you'll see that there's a conversation on the topic of gratitude. Now, flip the page, and there's another conversation about gratitude with a green heading. So here's the thing. The blue headings are for you as mentors. They offer some biblical references and some ways to prepare your heart and mind for the conversations, as well as some things you might want to consider during the conversation and after the conversation. Now, the green headings indicate that this is the conversation guide that your mentees will have. They'll get their own manual with just those pages. And you'll notice that there are projects, for example, on the bottom of page 37, that they can do between mentoring sessions. These are optional projects, but if your mentee couple will choose one of these projects every month, it will make their mentoring experience just that much more valuable. So take a few minutes, look through the Mentoring Conversation Guide, and then share your observations with each other. We'll join you in a few more minutes.
Welcome back. We hope you're really getting excited about doing this kind of mentoring. So let's talk more about the qualifications of a good marriage mentor. We get that question a lot. Am I qualified? Well, there's a list on page 16 of the things that we know make great marriage mentors. The first one is to be personally mature. And what we mean here is that we can think outside of ourselves. We don't have to be the center of attention. We don't have to have people agree with us all the time. We're in it first and foremost for the mentees. That's maturity. Second thing is relational. Now, we're not talking personality. You can be an introvert or an extrovert. You can be loud. You can be quiet. You can be as different as your mentees are going to be different. But you do have to be committed to building a mentoring relationship with them. The next thing, caring. I'm sure I'd hardly need to say this. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care about mentoring and care about some people. But that's essential. There's a great quote on the middle of page 16. And right at the end, note that phrase, know what you know and care about the person. It's really not about your expertise. It's about caring. Then you need to be a good listener. We talk a lot about that in a few minutes, so I'll just leave that for right now.
Mentors are also servant-hearted. You have to want to serve our mentee couples, not to pursue our own agendas. We will have obviously more expertise and knowledge than our mentee couple, but we treat them as equals, and we serve their best interests, and we don't indulge our own. Authentic and honest is the next one. That's really important. If you want to present some sort of plastic image about yourselves and your marriage, mentoring is not for you. When we're authentic, our mentees are able to be authentic as well. We need to be willing to be vulnerable. Now, that goes hand in hand with authenticity, but it needs to be appropriate vulnerability. Our mentees are not there to listen to our confessions, but we do need to be willing to share our even less than stellar moments as a couple if we can also share what we have learned from those moments.
Good mentors are growing. They're growing as individuals, and they're growing as a couple. Marriage is a great place to grow. I don't think there's a better place to grow up. And we need to model that kind of growth for our mentee couples. You don't need to model perfection, but we model growth. No matter where we're at in our lives, we need to show our mentees we're still working on our stuff, we're still growing, we're still trying to learn, we're still investing in our marriage. That's part of what it means to be successfully married. And that's where we want to go right now. We want you to have a conversation at your table about what it really means to be successfully married. There's a Let's Talk box at the bottom of page 16. Let that guide your conversation for the next few minutes. What do you think it means to be successfully married? And can you think of some qualities besides the ones we've listed here that make for great mentors? Enjoy the conversation. We'll see you in a few minutes.
We've talked about what good mentors are. Now let's briefly touch on what they are not. There's a list on page 17, and the first one, marriage mentors are not perfect. Now, if that was the standard, we were all supposed to be perfect, we should all just leave.
I think you're perfect.
No one would be able to mentor if that were the case. There is no such thing as a perfect marriage, but a marriage that has stood the test of time, that is joyful and life-giving and honest and real, that's a successful marriage, even if you've had to work hard at it, especially if you've had to work hard for it.
Good mentors are not marriage counselors. When it comes to helping marriages, there are really two schools of approach. One is the growth and education track, and that includes mentoring. And then there's the repair and restoration track, which includes pastoral counseling, clinical counseling, and therapy. Now, mentors need to know our own role, and we need to know when to refer, and we're going to talk more specifically about that later in the workshop. But in any case, we need to be clear of what we can do and what we can't do. The fact is, there are a lot of things that we can't do that professional counselors do, and we shouldn't try. But this is also true. Mentors are able to do some things professional counselors cannot.
Good mentors are not referees. We need to be very cautious about getting into any sort of adjudicator role. When our mentee couples are at odds on any particular issue, it's not our job to say who's right and who's wrong. We don't take sides. We are on the side of the marriage. What we can do is provide a framework for couples to be able to articulate their thoughts and their feelings, to hear each other well, and to help them find their own solutions, all by asking questions. Mentors are also not rescuers. We can't allow our mentees to get into a codependent relationship with us. We're there to facilitate their growth, to help them bond more deeply to each other and to God, not to us.
Related to that, we are not parents. Mentors are not parents. For one thing, parenting is for life, and mentoring is generally a bit more of a catch and release kind of enterprise. Now, occasionally there can be mentoring relationships that go on for a while, but for the most part, and the model we're recommending here, is that it's only for a year. So invest in your mentees and in their relationship, and then let them go. It doesn't mean you can't stay friends or you don't maintain some kind of contact. In fact, it's been our case that we've stayed in touch with almost all our mentee couples. But what it means is that good mentors never lose sight of the fact that we are privileged to walk with them just for a limited time in order to strengthen them for a lifetime.
Mentors are not experts. We don't set ourselves up as experts, so we don't have to pretend to be experts. If our mentees ask a question and we don't know the answer, we just say, we don't know. But let's try to figure it out together. We've tried to give you some additional resources in the resources section in the back of your manual. They are links to experts and books from experts, so you don't have to be the experts.
The Christian writer C.S. Lewis said a really bright thing. He said a lot of bright things, but I like this. He said, "Consider us patients, admitted to the same hospital as you just a little bit earlier. Perhaps we can show you around." That's kind of the attitude I have when we mentor.
Now we're going to ask you to spend a few minutes, just you and your spouse, right where you are, though of course you can turn into each other and away from the other people at your table, to talk about the qualities you each have and the strengths you have as a couple that will help you become good mentors. Use the Just For You box on the bottom of page 17, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
So far, we've talked about what marriage mentors are and what they are not. Now we're going to look at what marriage mentors actually do. We're looking at page 18. You know, one of my favorite quotes of wisdom is from Albert Einstein. I think I like to use this quote because I just feel smarter. But he said, "Make things as simple as possible, but no simpler." That's good, isn't it? Make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. So here you go. As simple as possible, but no simpler. Here's 4 things marriage mentors do. First of all, we build a relationship. Then we need to ask good questions and listen with empathy. Third, we share what we know and we share who we are. And then the 4th thing good mentors have to do is become enthusiastic champions. Now, of course, we hope you'll become champions for marriage in general, but especially for your mentee. So we're going to add a little substance to all 4 of these.
The first one, build relationship. Leadership guru John Maxwell says relationships grow as 3 questions are answered. They're on page 18 in your manual. Do you care for me is the first one. Do you like me? Do you respect me? Do you want to know me? The care and respect you show your mentee couple will make them more receptive to your input. They'll want to know what you have to say. Second one is, can you help me? Mentees want to know that you have something to offer them. Are you competent? Can you understand me? Do you have any common ground with me? That identification with them increases your influence. And then thirdly, can I trust you? Back to that authenticity piece. Will I be able to share honestly with you? Do I dare be vulnerable with you? And they won't be if you aren't. Is it safe to tell the truth? Again, you model that trust when you offer them pieces of your story. You trust them with who you are, and it will help them be willing to trust you. Now, we aren't just building a relationship to have these people like us or so that we can become friends with them, although hopefully that happens, but it's actually not necessary. We're building a relationship in order to help them grow. They need to respect you, they need to be able to identify with you, and they need to trust you. They don't need us to go to the movies with them or go to their birthday parties or become their Facebook friends. We have a very important role to play in their lives that is different and in some ways can be even more important than friendship.
The second thing we need to talk about is how to ask good questions and listen with empathy. Now, we're going to start this topic with you. On page 19, there's another blue Let's Talk box, and there's some really good questions in there for you to discuss at your table. So take a look at those, share the wisdom around the table, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. We're still working on that question, what do marriage mentors do? We're emphasizing right now that they ask good questions. We believe that you can get at almost anything in a marriage mentoring relationship by asking questions. When you're mentoring, actually, it's always more effective to get at something using a question rather than by simply telling the mentees, this is what you should do. I've spent the bulk of my adult life trying to understand better how to help people learn, how to help people grow and change. And here's what I know for sure. The deepest truths, the kind that change our lives, they can't be transferred from one person to another just like moving a piece of furniture. Those kinds of things need to take root deep within us. Frankly, they're the work of God in us, but we can play a profound role by asking the right questions and encouraging growth. So asking questions is a bit of a fine art, something we can get better at, but it's so important. So right now we're going to spend some time walking through a few different kinds of questions that would be really good for us all to have in our toolbox as we go into marriage mentoring. If you look at the top of page 20, you'll see the first class of questions we call opening questions. There's a few examples there, and I really like that first example, the one that says, can you tell me more about? I use that one all the time in conversation and in mentoring. I use it to draw the mentee out a little bit more, but I also use it when I'm trying to cover for myself, when I'm confused and I don't want to say, I don't understand what you're talking about. So I'll say, tell me a little bit more about that. I like the third one too. The third one's really helpful. When somebody's just said something and you think it's really important, and you turn to the spouse and you say, what do you think about what they just said? That is a great tool for taking the conversation to a good place.
The second type of good questions are clarifying questions. You need to make sure you understand what they are really saying. We were in a conversation the other day, and I kind of went off on a several-minute rant on my take on the issue that I thought was on the table. Turned out that's not at all what the people were talking about, and I completely missed it. Fortunately, Neil was listening and asked a clarifying question. Did I understand correctly? And then we kind of were able to get things back on track. But we need to hear things, we need to clarify because we hear things through our own filters. You know, the other reason that clarifying questions help is that it makes clear that the husband and the wife are hearing each other accurately. So when you ask one, what do you mean by that? You might actually be asking because you're not clear, but you may be asking because you think their partner is not clear and you want them to hear it again. Or something like this, if they're kind of fumbling around, you can clarify for them. You can say, it sounds like you're kind of frustrated, for example, when your wife doesn't call you and tell you she's going to be late. Is that so? Is that accurate? Just something like that will help everybody kind of get on the same page and clarify what we're talking about.
Next class of questions is a probing group of questions. Now, as your relationship grows and you build some more trust, these questions get a little more appropriate. They say something and you want to take them a little deeper. You kind of have the inkling like something really important's going on here, and you want to dig a little deeper. A couple of examples in your manual of probing questions, and these are examples that help us probe safely. We do this all the time. We'll take it on ourselves. So, for example, this question about, maybe your spouse doesn't call you when they're going to be late. We'll say, if that was me, I'd feel like I was being disrespected. Like it would really bother me, like you don't respect my time or think I'm important. But I'm not you. What do you think? Yeah, you see how that's a potentially volatile little comment to make, but I put it in my voice and then I ask them, do you identify with that? So that's a way to probe in what we think is a little bit of a safer way. Now you can always have it wrong. Like maybe they'll use their own words and they'll say, no, I don't feel disrespected. I just worry. When I don't hear, I'm worried she's in a ditch. So that's okay. Even if you don't get it right, you prompt them to get to a deeper place. One of the real prime benefits of mentoring is when we can actually probe a little deeper, because it'll bring issues to the surface that maybe the couple hasn't done or couldn't do on their own. Sometimes when we probe deeper, we give them some language that they can use to talk about important things. Okay, the next class of questions, empowering questions. You see, if we can guide our mentees to the place of honestly sharing what they're thinking and what they're feeling, then it's time to lead them towards some action. The goal of mentoring isn't just to share our thoughts and feelings, it's to actually guide people into better ways of building their marriage and living together, right? There's some really good empowering questions there on page 21. So what could you do about this? What could each of you have done differently? Next time, what's one thing you could each do to make the situation better? So questions like this, borrow these ones and use them, and then as you get better at your mentoring, you'll create your own and tweak your own. But it's important to get to the questions that put the power back in their hands. You see, it isn't helpful in the long run at all to take control of the mentee's situation. Just simply tell them what to do. But it also isn't enough to just sort of leave them without giving them some helpful and hopeful next steps. And that's what empowering questions are supposed to be about. Sometimes it really does take a third party to remind us that things can be different. A third party to support us and push us on, right? Make us name the changes we need to make and probably the changes we know we need to make.
The last class of questions is encouraging questions, and these are probably my favorite type of questions. They're a lot of fun. Tell us one thing that's growing in your relationship. What's one thing your spouse has done that you'd like him or her to continue? Or what's one small difference you're noticing in your relationship? These are great questions for opening and closing a conversation. It puts the mentee couple in the right frame of mind, focusing on the positive, focusing on growth. They puts them in sort of an appreciative mind frame, even if the topic of the day is a tricky one. So maybe that day you're talking about in-laws or money or conflict. But if you can get them started or end the session talking about the nice thing their spouse did for them that day or how they're improving in one area of their relationship, it warms up the atmosphere. It's the power of asking positive questions. They really do help turn from a problem-saturated focus to one of gratitude and contentment. And you're identifying and encouraging growth. And they may not be able to see it on their own, but when you ask good questions, they can start to see that they are making headway.
A recent study found that it only takes 5% improvement for someone to believe that they can actually make it all the way towards their goal. Lose 5% of the weight, you get encouragement to keep going. Save 5% of the money, you get the belief that you can save it all. Even a small improvement provides motivation for us to carry on, and that's true for your mentee couple as well. They need to see 5% improvement on their relationship in order to believe that they can develop the marriage that they want. You can help them see that. Sometimes it's hard to see growth in us and ourselves, but by asking good questions, encouraging questions, empowering questions, we can help them see that 5% growth. Now, on the bottom of page 21, there's a brown box. Once again, these are recommendations, but this might be the best thing we can tell you in this workshop. We recommend that you mentor by the 75-25 rule. The mentee couple should carry about 75% of the conversation. As mentors, you should aim to speak only about 25% of the time. And let's just say, this is really hard.
It's really
First
hard.
of all, you likely have lots of good things to say, and some of the issues they raise are so simple, and you just go, oh, you just need to do this. But we got to resist that. They need to discover that on their own. And then the second thing that makes it really hard is 25% divided in half is only 12.5% each.
Not much.
That's not a lot of time to talk. But here's what we've learned. Mentees will change and grow and learn only when they arrive at those things themselves. You provide the right environment, you give them language, you ask some good questions, and you push them towards the opportunity to hear one another. Sometimes they find out for the first time what the other one really thinks, and we get them on the same page. If they get talking honestly and freely, they will arrive at their own solutions. Don't short-circuit the process.
We guide that process by asking questions. So most of our 25% will be in the form of questions. That's why under the blue headings in the mentor guide, we'll often ask you as you're preparing for a conversation to identify one or two stories from your life that would be helpful to pass on, or one principle that you really want to share. But most of the time, you'll be listening. And it's sometimes why teachers and pastors have a hard time being good mentors, at least at first. You know, you're just wired up to teach, to pass on information. And so to just sit and ask questions and listen can be really hard. But here's the thing, you can still teach. Have you ever looked at how much of Jesus' teaching was in the form of questions? Read the stories about Jesus in the Bible, the greatest teacher in all of history, and see how often he asked questions.
The next step after asking good questions is to listen and listen with empathy. Flip over to page 22. There's a definition right at the top of the page of what empathy is. The ability to imagine yourself in someone else's place and understand that other person's feelings, desires, ideas, and actions. That's difficult to do. There's two parts. We need to imagine, and then we need to try and understand. This is really an important part of mentoring. We have to try to put ourselves in their situation. Now, you know what? Frankly, I find this really hard. In fact, true confession, sometimes in our mentoring conversations, inside I'm just standing up, getting in the guy's face and saying, are you stupid? Are you nuts? I guess that's not
helpful.
Good question, but it is a question. On my better days, I try to ask the questions that are in the manual. You know, if this were me, what would I be feeling? What would I be thinking? And if I come up with something, I test it with them. I use a probing question like, you know, if I were you, I'd be thinking this, but you tell me what you're thinking. And if I come up with nothing, then maybe I fall back on, can you tell me more about that? Until I try to understand with empathy. The key is I'm not actually trying to get it to make sense to me. I'm trying to understand why it makes sense to them, right? Why it makes sense to him, why it makes sense to her. Mentors need to listen between the lines. We need to discern what's really happening. For example, people don't threaten divorce because their spouse won't let them buy a couch. Somebody once told me that. People think of leaving because they don't feel trusted, they don't feel valued, they feel controlled, they feel disrespected, they have no voice, they have no power. Those are the things that drive people to discouragement. The couch is just the presenting issue. So get past the surface and say what's really going on here. And we do that by listening. Maybe you noticed that Stephen Covey quote on the bottom of page 19. It says, most people do not listen with the intent to understand, and I think that's true. They listen with the intent to reply. In fact, what's that statistic? Usually people only listen for 17 seconds before they jump in. And you know, let's be honest, you spend most of that 17 seconds preparing your answer. As mentors, we got to do better than that. We want to listen in order to understand.
The third thing mentors do is to share what you know and share who you are. We're in the middle of page 22. You have survived crises together as a couple. You have celebrated successes. You have enjoyed life. You've endured difficulties. You've been disappointed. You've been surprised. You've failed each other. You've forgiven each other. All of this living is what you have to offer your mentee couple. What you know is everything you have gained through your life experience. as it relates to your mentee couple's life and marriage journey. Did you catch that? The stuff you know that doesn't relate or connect to their life is pretty much irrelevant in this context. So you share your stories, your successes, your failures, and your lessons learned rather than giving advice. Now, advice can be appropriate when asked for. And trust us, they will ask. But more than what you know, who you are will matter to your mentee couple. How you relate to each other, the way you look at each other, the respect with which you listen to each other, the way you laugh at each other's jokes.
That's good.
And the teamwork you display, as well as your care for your mentees, that will speak louder than any sort of advice you might give them. So briefly, put your heads together around the table and answer the questions on page 23. What are some ways to convey teamwork, respect, gratitude for your partner in conversations with your mentees? And after you've made the list, then turn over the page to page 24 and enter into a conversation just with your spouse. Now, this will be a really important conversation for you to have. It brings up some questions that you will need to answer as you proceed into the mentoring relationship. What's our story? What have we learned? What are some principles that are worth passing on? So take about 3 minutes in your group and then move into a couple conversation. Your facilitator will tell you when 3 minutes is up. Take about 5 minutes and we'll rejoin you after that.
Welcome back. We hope you really enjoyed that discussion. And before we move on, I just want to highlight once again a brown box, this one at the bottom of page 24. Those 4 things are all really good suggestions, especially the second one. Use only stories from your life that both of you are willing to share. We kind of have a rule of thumb that if we haven't asked for pre-permission to tell a story about us, we don't tell it. Now a lot of that will be taken care of, that pre-permission will be taken care of if you build your own marriage story bank ahead of time. Flip over to page 25. That's what we're talking about there. There's some resources at the back of the book, page 102. Check that out and begin to build your marriage story bank. It's actually kind of fun because you go through like which stories are we willing to tell, how are we going to tell it, what's the most helpful way to share it with our mentees. So check that out and build your marriage story bank.
And the final thing mentors do is to become enthusiastic champions. You're championing their marriage. So commend their commitment. They signed up for mentoring. They're showing up in every month. They're committed to making their marriage the best it can be. Commend them for that. They are among that small 20% of couples that intentionally invest in their marriage. They deserve a lot of credit. Secondly, highlight their progress. You can see growth perhaps where they can't. We've already said that. You know, you might want to kind of remember back to something that happened when you first started meeting together and bring them up to speed. You know that you said you wanted to learn how to disagree without being mean to each other. Well, look at you now. Here you are disagreeing right in front of us, but you're not being mean. You've come a long ways. And then maybe you could probe a little and ask them, like, what has this done for your ability to trust each other? Get them to articulate their growth if you can. Share their struggles. You don't have to solve them, but a shoulder to cry on, a big hug once a month, and a listening ear can go a long ways to lightening their load. Celebrate success. Remember that 5% improvement research? Celebrate every 5% with them. Identify next steps, or more accurately, help them identify next steps. Offer gentle accountability. Remember, you're not their parents, but there is a place for mentors to ask about the next steps that they committed to. Sometimes just knowing that someone's going to ask you about it is enough incentive to stick to the program. Gentle accountability.
One more thing that we as mentors are in a perfect place to do is to paint the bigger picture for our mentees. You know, when people are maxed out, either from their schedule or hurt or personal issues, sometimes they really can't see past the end of the day. They can't believe that tomorrow's going to be any better or that it won't be even worse. We can help them see that. We can help them look a few months, a few years down the road. If they're raising toddlers, we often say to young couples, look, this is really just a phase. It's a tough season to stay connected. It's hard to be romantic, but you will come through it. So just keep the pilot light burning, you know? And then when a little later in your marriage, you can turn it back up. So we got to paint that bigger picture of hope and moving forward. With your example and your encouragement, you can raise the goal and keep it in front of them. The goal to finish together, loving each other fully to the end, no one left behind. You know, sometimes when you're feeling pretty deep in the weeds, you really need somebody to remind you of that. It's hard to believe it on your own. And then the last thing, a way to be a champion is to pray. You know, praying isn't all we can do. We gave you a bunch of things here, but maybe prayer is the best thing we can do. Throughout your mentor conversation guide, which starts on page 31 there are suggestions for praying before, during, and after each session. Do it. And we suggest telling your mentees that you pray for them, even if they're not yet people of faith. Just knowing that somebody's holding them up before God, that this relationship isn't just about the four of you, but God's involved. It reminds them of the value of their marriage, of their family, and their future. What do you pray for them? You can't do better than this. Pray love and joy and peace and patience, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, and kindness. These are the things that will help them love each other well for a lifetime, and these are the gifts that God gives.
All right, time now to put all of this into practice. You're going to actually get a chance to mentor another couple at your table. We're at the bottom of page 25 in the Let's Talk section. In groups of 2 couples, don't go more than that if you can possibly avoid it. It won't actually be the same experience. But in groups of 4, then 2 couples, engage in the gratitude conversation on page 36. One couple will act as mentors. You'll be asking the questions, guiding the conversation, remembering the 25-75 rule, and the other couple will be the mentees. And then after 10 minutes, your facilitator will signal to you that it's time to switch roles, and you can continue the conversation from there. You can also go back and re-ask some of the same questions if you'd like. It's completely up to you. You're the mentors. You can do what you want. Have a great conversation, and we'll see you in about 20 minutes.
Hey, welcome back. We're pretty sure that you really enjoyed that time. In every training we've ever done, that's usually the participant's favorite part. I mean, the part where we
don't talk.
Exactly. But it does really make sense that you would enjoy it because that's why you're here, right? It's this mentoring conversation. It's in you. You want to connect with someone else. You enjoy sharing life on life and hearing people's stories. So I know you enjoyed it. I hope you also discovered really how easy the conversational format is. You ask simple questions and you let the conversation unfold. We've designed these conversations with some easier and lighter questions up front, often revolving around family of origin issues, our patterns and memories growing up. And then we begin to get progressively deeper and deeper into the issue, getting much more focused on the specifics of their life together right now. The conversations usually end up on a very practical question, something like, what's one thing you can do to improve in this area? Or with a positive question, what have you learned to appreciate about each other today in this conversation? We think it's really, really important to manage the time well so that you can end practically and positively, to bring the focus back to one of gratitude and appreciation for the effort that the partner's been made, that the couple's working on, and the growth that they've already experienced.
We hope you also noticed how much fun it is to hear other people's stories. It is a gift they give you. As both mentors and mentees, we need to hold those stories very carefully and keep them in strict confidence. You can feel free to talk about the overall experience of mentoring with other people. In fact, we hope you do, actually. We want this mentoring thing to catch on. But talk about the fulfilling aspects, maybe even the frustrating aspects of mentoring, but keep the specifics of your mentee's life to yourselves. It is their story to tell, not yours. And they're being instructed in the Mentoring Conversation Guide to do the same for you. I bet you were also surprised at how quickly the time passed. 20 minutes, just like that. You can see why you will need a full 60 minutes to have a good conversation about each of those topics.
Now, please remember, it isn't necessary to cover all the questions. We never intended that. In fact, it's better to skip some of the questions, in the earlier or the mid part of the session in order to save time at the end to finish well. And in every mentor situation, it's very possible that one of those questions will spark a much needed conversation. And in that moment, we just say, go for it. Go with the flow of there. Because you can, even if you never get back to the questions in the book, those kind of breakthrough moments can never be scripted. And that's the best part of mentoring.
Yeah.
Now, the gratitude conversation that you just experimented with, that's a good one. We would suggest that when you first get together with your mentors and you're planning your strategy, start with that one. It's a nice get-to-know-you way to start. It's non-threatening. It's positive. It's a nice way to begin your mentoring relationship. After that, we encourage you to feel free to pick and choose the conversations from the remaining 13 that seem most important and do them in whatever order you choose. Maybe one of those topics seems really relevant right now. Holidays are coming up, and so you want to pick up that theme. I don't know, but you make the call, so that together you design the marriage mentoring conversations the way they fit you and your mentees. So don't get locked into the sequence. Choose the ones that fit the best.
Let's move on to a very important section of your orientation. Yes, these will come up. On page 26, you'll see the issues that most typically emerge from mentoring conversations. When these come up, try to avoid a few things. Try to avoid adopting your mentee couple's stress. You're the steady hand in their lives. Try to avoid becoming confrontational or authoritarian. When we see behavior or attitudes that we think are wrong, it's pretty tempting to confront and get really directive. That's not the way to treat your wife. You should stop interrupting her. Or, you guys, you're bad with money. You need to stop using credit cards. That's trying to solve their problems. And we need to help guide them to solving their own problems. Again, ask good questions. So you might say instead, I notice you have a tendency to jump in when your wife is speaking. Why do you think you do that? And how does that make her feel, do you think? Or you might just look at her and say, how does that make you feel? And in the money illustration, you might say, I'm so sorry you guys find yourselves in this financial situation. What have you learned from this experience? Or what do you think drives you to overspend month after month? Is it stress, do you think? Some patterns from childhood? Or what could you have done differently? Guiding them to solving their own problems and getting at some of the root issues is what mentors can do for them.
When we're mentoring people through these issues, it's really important to focus on the relationship the mentees are building more than on the problems they're trying to solve, okay? So Cheryl talked about some things to avoid. Let's talk about some things to focus on. Now, John Gottman, who's one of the best researchers in North America right now on relationships, he did a study, and he looked at couples who said that they were unhappy, and he found that 69% of the conflict that they said they had was over perpetual issues, things that just never went away.
Yep.
Then he researched couples who said that they were happy in their marriage, and he asked them how much of their conflict was over perpetual issues. You know what the answer was? You probably guessed it, 69%. See, the fact here is that it's not the problems per se that determines whether couples are satisfied or dissatisfied. It's the strength of the relationship. So the kinds of things that we can do as good mentors is to help them focus on strengthening the relationship, not exactly solving the problem. Do you get that? Next thing, we can focus as mentors on providing a safe, judgment-free zone for our mentees to work things out. Once again, it's not a role to be the judge and the jury, but we want to create a place where the truth can be spoken and heard, and then guide them to actually do something about it for the sake of their relationship. The next thing we want to say is to focus on allowing both spouses to have equal voice to air their concerns. Not being heard or respected or taken seriously is a common source of pain for a lot of couples. And mentoring can help bring this issue to light. I remember feeding back to one guy that he rolled his eyes or he looked away every time his wife spoke. And when I challenged him on that, he denied it. And his wife quietly said, "You always do that when I talk." Wow, that was a breakthrough moment. It was a hard conversation, I got to tell you. But frankly, it was one that would have never happened outside of a safe third-party environment like mentoring. Next thing, try to normalize their struggles. Just even that fact we shared with you. 69% of happily married couples have recurring issues. A lot of young couples don't know this. When they have issues, they think, oh no, I've married the wrong person, or I'm a bad person, or we're going to fail. You just need to normalize some of the things that our couples walk through. Not that they can't grow and change, but it's not abnormal to have stress and to have conflict, and it takes a mentor to tell them that. Moving on, focus on helping them identify at least one next step. Ask, so what are you going to do to work on this month? What's one thing you're each willing to do that might help resolve the issue? Just trying to encourage that 5% growth. Now, for most mentee couples, these are the most helpful ways to help them when there's issues in their marriage. There are, however, other issues, a whole nother class of issues, and they call for a whole nother response. So we're going to look at those on page 27.
If you become aware that any of these factors listed on page 27 are factors in your mentee couple's relationship, abuse, addictions, infidelity, serious or chronic mental, emotional, or physical health issues, or financial crisis, don't be afraid to ask for help. Go to your marriage mentoring leaders, if you're part of a mentoring program, or your pastor, if you're part of a church, or a local marriage and family therapist that you trust, and develop a plan. Now, you'll notice in the Family Life Recommends box on the bottom of the page that we don't believe that mentoring necessarily has to end should any of these more serious issues arise. You may want to stay in their lives for encouragement and support, but working through these serious issues is a job for professionals, not mentors. And if current domestic violence or current infidelity is involved, mentoring is not advised. There's no point in mentoring until that toxic, destructive, core issue has been resolved with professional help. On page 112 in your manual, there's a list of red flag symptoms and signs that might indicate there's something more serious going on in terms of their emotional, mental, and physical health. You might want to turn to that page and just take a look at it when you get a chance. And then while you're at it, turn over to page 111 for just a minute. There's a whole section, 110 and 111, on forgiveness. Undoubtedly, this will come up in your mentoring conversations. The need for forgiveness, the difficulty of forgiving, how to do it. This section focuses on a very biblical view of forgiveness, that we are to forgive as God has forgiven us. But it's also based on solid relationship research. Couples who are able to forgive are happier.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the process now. First, you need to be oriented to mentoring in general and the Family Life Candidate Tool specifically, and that's what we've done here today. The next step is for the two of you to agree that you want to become mentors. Now, maybe this isn't for you, or maybe it's just not right now. But if it is something you want to commit to, then the third step would be to work through any qualifying steps that your church or your organization has set in place. Maybe it's a resume or an interview or both, but you need to do those. The fourth thing is to wait then to be matched with your mentee couple. Now, if you're doing this on your own, good for you.
Yeah.
We're really glad about that. Thanks for caring about marriages. Well, then just move on, along with the other folks, to the next step, which is this, to set up your first meeting with your mentee couple. In that first session, you'll want to have a discussion about some logistics. Now, we've put down on page 28 some of the key things that we think you should talk about. For example, how often are you going to meet? And when will your meetings occur? Now, we recommend monthly, but some couples prefer to meet more often. That's kind of up to you. You need to decide when, where, and for how long each conversation will take place. Again, we recommended 90 minutes, but talk it over with your mentees, make an agreement, and then stick to it. The third thing you should air out is to discuss the boundaries. For example, how much contact outside the regular conversations are you willing to have? You maybe will decide that you'd rather they didn't call you between sessions. Maybe you're worried that they're going to become a bit codependent and turn to you instead of to one another, and that's a very decent concern. Or maybe you're open to having them text you or call you with prayer requests or updates or little victories or conversations. That's completely up to you. We've actually done both. And where we've landed is we usually stick pretty clearly to the boundaries around the mentoring meeting. We meet for this time, we talk about these things, and in between, we're not your buddies, we aren't your parents, we aren't your accountability partners, but we will pray for you every day, and we want you to know we're in your corner, and we can't wait to see you next month. That's kind of where we end up.
It is kind of.
But you'll need to decide what works for you as a couple, and that might even change depending on the couple you're mentoring.
That's right.
So pay attention to that too.
So what if there's no chemistry with your mentee couple? Actually, we hear the question more often coming from the younger mentee couples. They want to know what happens if they just don't connect with their mentors. We address that in the brown box on the bottom of page 28. We suggest that you actually agree to a trial period of at least 3 conversations, after which you decide whether or not to proceed with the year-long mentoring relationship. That just gives you both a way out if it just isn't going to work. We do suggest, however, the 3-session minimum because it often takes that long to get over that get-to-know-you stage and any awkward first impressions. You don't just connect with everybody right away. And remember, you don't need to be friends, but you do need to be able to build relationship, so there needs to be the capacity, at least, to build respect and trust, and also to be able to find some common ground.
We also encourage you at the first meeting to spend at least a little time clarifying your expectations and setting goals. We've got some ideas for you on the top of page 29. And we encourage you to walk through these. Clarify hopes and expectations, identify any measurable goals that you might want to have, like Cheryl gave one earlier. We want to learn how to have an argument without yelling at each other.
That's a measurable goal.
Maybe you want to agree right at that first meeting of the first 2 or 3 conversations that you're going to have. Don't schedule all 10 and that kind of thing. Pick the first 2 or 3. Now, we've suggested gratitude is one, so pick 1 or 2 after that. And then as you develop the relationship, you'll know which conversations are most important. Next thing we encourage you to talk about is confidentiality. Please offer and get a promise of confidentiality. We can't stress this enough. The quality of your mentoring is going to depend on the amount of trust you have, and that's really related to the confidentiality that you give to one another, okay? And then the last thing we really encourage you to bring up is ask your mentees, are there any topics on this list that are just off limits to you? For example, we had one couple that just said, from her culture, men and women didn't talk about sexuality together in mixed company, right? And so we don't want to offend her, so that's no problem. We won't go there. So maybe you just want to raise it. Probably there's no issues, but it would be wise to bring it up early at that first meeting. So there you go. Maybe those conversations will come back anyhow, but at the beginning, they may name some things as sort of being off limits. So just be patient and see if they come back on the table.
We recommend, middle of page 29 now, that not only do you live up to your commitment to meet regularly, but that you also expect your mentees to do the same. So if they consistently cancel or try to reschedule, suggest kindly but firmly that you end the mentoring relationship until they're able or willing to fit it into their lives. Sometimes it's just circumstances. Sometimes one partner is more into the mentoring than the other. But until they are both willing to really engage, you likely have better things to do with your time. Why don't you mentor another couple that's eager to learn from your wisdom and experience and wait till that first couple is ready? So, let's talk. What excites you about what you've been learning? What intimidates you? And what needs to happen before you might be ready to proceed as mentors? We'll give you a few minutes to chat through those questions at your table, and then we'll come back for just a couple of minutes to wrap up your orientation.
I hope there was more excitement than intimidation in that conversation. We just need to tell you as we wrap up that we love mentoring. We believe in mentoring. And we've tested this particular model of mentoring in different settings, and it works. It does help strengthen marriage. It does help reduce divorce, and it helps us pass on faith to those younger couples.
That's a lot of information you've received today. Thank you so much for spending these hours with us. Please stay in touch with us at Family Life Canada. In the back of your manual, you'll see our website. There are some additional resources on there, and you'll also find our email address. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what works for you once you get into the mentoring relationships. Let us know what doesn't work. Tell us about your successes, about your challenges. You know, you're part of a growing network of marriage mentors across this country, and we can both learn from and be encouraged by one another. So let's stay in touch.
Cheryl and I pray every day for the marriages of Canada. And here's what we pray: that the hurting ones would find help and that the strong ones would reach out. We think God wants to answer that prayer through a growing community of marriage mentors across this country. We hope that you'll be part of the answer to that prayer. So thanks again for your time today. We want to wrap up this session by praying for you. God and Father of us all, thank you for the gift of love and of marriage. Teach us to grow deep in you, deep with our spouse, and to bless others through mentoring and in many other ways. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.